Hi, I'm Peter Charles, and welcome to the second part of rod repair. Today we're going to look at wrapping the repair. Wherever we put two rod sections together, there's going to be a gap. We try and fill that gap with glue as much as we can, but if we really wanted to finish it off, we'd apply some thread to it, wrap it just as if we were wrapping a guide on a rod. Now, I'm making certain assumptions here. I have a rod building gear, and I could have easily done it on my rod building gear. But instead, I made the decision that since most people listening to this video would not have rod building gear, I've constructed a jury rig here with a cardboard box, and I've set up my thread on this piece of wood with a screwdriver just to show you how we can put a simple kit together in order to wrap this rod. So let's look at what I've done first. I've taken this box. Now you'll see some white cardboard, and that's just for visibility so you can see what I'm doing. I've cut two V-slots here. You notice I didn't do a very good job, so the rod is crooked in it. Also at the bottom of this box there's some weight to keep it from moving around. So that's simple for the box. Also, I've slit the box right here, and as you can see, my thread is going through it. And that allows me to control the tension on the thread. Now, as far as this rig I've got down here, what I've done with this is I could have easily used one of these. This is, a bobbin and a bobbin holder we use when tying flies. I figure most people wouldn't have that, but most people do have a screwdriver and maybe a clamp or two. So what I've done is I've clamped a screwdriver to a piece of wood, and I've clamped that whole thing to the table. And the one critical thing I've done is I've got washers on either side of the spool, and two of those washers are like a fiber washer. Or you could use felt. You could use a spring from a ballpoint pen if you wanted to. You just need something that allows you to apply controlled tension to the spool. We don't want it free spooling, and we don't want it so tight we can't move it. So we got to come with a happy medium, and I'm using two fiber washers, but if you've got some other method to do that, as I say, a ballpoint pen spring, anything like that allows you to apply a constant pressure, that'll work. So that's a simple rig that I put together, and I'm going to be using a very bright thread here. A little long, I'll cut it a bit shorter. There we go. So I've got this very bright chartreuse thread. Normally you would use a thread that's suitable for the color of the rod. In this case, I would be using this black because this rod is an extremely dark blue. You wouldn't want to use a contrasting thread because it shows up too much. This is a repair. We want to try and hide it as much as possible, not make it stick out and let everybody know that you broke your rod there. Okay, a couple of things to note about the repair. It's got some cracks, as you can see. It's also flared out. So when I broke it, the ends flared. So now it's not even, as you can see. It's got a little bit of a ragged end to it. So when we start wrapping the thread over that, the thread's going to shift around a little bit. It's not going to be pretty. This is a repair to make the rod usable again. It's not a repair to make it look pretty. So I'm using this neon thread so you can see what it looks like. Ideally, we would use the type of thread we'd use in rod building, but if you don't have that kind of thread, the stuff that you use to tie flies with will work. Any kind of strong thread that will work, especially something that will absorb glue. I'd avoid using something that was really slick that might not absorb the epoxy that well. So let's get started. Now to get the thread started, it's slippery, right? That finish is slippery. So if I just try to turn the thread on here, it's just going to slip. And you can see I'm crossing that tag end. I'm using the pressure of my fingers to help roll it. And you can see it's slipping a little bit. That's fine. We'll get that fixed in. That's just because of the tension I've applied to the bobbin. And once you get it rolling, Okay, now we can cut that tag end off. You notice I'm keeping a grip of the rod blank. If I let it go, it would spin out on me. Okay, now we can begin to wrap. You find yourself leaving too big a gap, back up. I'm going to stop there for a moment. When I get to that break, it's going to get ugly, and I know that. I might actually make a couple of passes back and forth to fill up that space. So that's to be expected. You see how I dropped in the gap? I'd filled that gap as much as I could with glue, but it's still dropping in there. Okay, I'll stop there. I'll keep a grip on everything. And I have this piece of black thread here. And I'm going to pass it underneath, keeping a grip. And you see how I've created this loop. And you'll see how that gets used in a few moments. Now we put on about another 1/8 of an inch of wrap. Okay. Bring it around. Now put your finger on that, don't let go. Give yourself some slack to work with. Cut the thread. Pull that loop out. Now drop that through the loop. Pull this tight. Now pull the other tag tight. Okay, now pull it through. Not didn't get all the way through, but that's good. It got underneath there anyway. That's par for the course. Now I'm just going to tighten some of those up a little bit with my fingernail. Okay, now we're ready to start epoxying. So I'm going to prepare my epoxy, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this little cheap brush I got from the dollar store, and I'm going to use that to put the epoxy on. So go get yourself a cup of coffee. We'll be back in a minute. Okay, my epoxy's ready. I'm using 5-minute epoxy here, and you'll see why in a moment. If I used anything that took longer to cure, we'd be here all day. So start by brushing on, roll the rod, and you'll see that I'm starting my epoxy on one side of the wrap. I'm going to actually put epoxy. This is old epoxy, it's not really that's going on that smoothly, but again, I'm not particularly worried about pretty. It's more important to get good coverage. Remind me to buy some new epoxy when this COVID-19 lockdown is over. Ooh, this stuff is old and very old and lumpy and ooh, not good. Get rid of that lump. Now I'll put a little bit more in the middle. There's another lump. Okay, that's enough. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to turn this for 5 minutes. And it's lumpy and bumpy. Now, a little trick you can do here. If you had a heat gun handy, apply a little heat to this just gently. That epoxy will flow like water. In fact, why don't I do that? I'll get the heat gun. Okay, don't get aggressive with this. I got one lump in there. Okay, you see how that smoothed out? Despite the fact I do have a lump in there. It smoothed out fairly well. So that's a little trick if your epoxy is a bit on the thick side like mine is and it didn't want to flow. Little zap with a heat gun and it will soften up and flow. So we just keep turning like this. So finish your coffee and I'll sit here and turn. Think of me while you're drinking it. And in a little while this will be ready. Okay, there's our repair. as I say, I'm using a contrasting thread so you can see, but normally I'd be using a black thread on this so it will blend in, you wouldn't see those gaps. And I'm using fresh epoxy so it wouldn't look so ugly. But nevertheless, it will hold together. And what this wrap does, this is the important thing, what the wrap does is it closes that gap where the two parts met. And if you've got any fractures like I had there, I've got these little small fractures all around the edge of that, they could start to work as the rod flexes, as you use it. Those cracks could grow. What that wrap does is it stops those cracks from growing. And I've done this in the past before. I've had a rod where I had a crack in the ferrule. I put some extra thread wraps on it, I put a little extra epoxy on it, and then I used the thing for years. So it does work. It will prevent those cracks from spreading anymore. And that's the reason why you put that wrap on there. And as you can see, it once that epoxy softens up and flows, it doesn't look so bad. If that was black thread, you know, it would look pretty good. So there you go. There's how you wrap a rod using nothing more than a cardboard box, a screwdriver, and some clamps and some thread. And you can wrap a rod and get a reasonably good repair out of it and continue using that fishing rod for years. So there you go. Get fishing and catch some fish once this lockdown is over. Cheers.